Special thanks to World of Warships for sponsoring today's video. Before we get started, there will be spoilers for the 1000-year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to come. Towards the end of the series, we're introduced to the single strongest group of villains that Bleach has ever known. Yhwach's personal royal guard, the Schutzstaffel, made up of 4 archangel Quincy's, whose power verges on the divine itself. And heading up the group are 2 of the most broken characters Kubo has ever written. The leader of the Schutzstaffel, Sternritter X, the X-axis Lille, and the Heart of the Soul King, Sternritter M, the Miracle, Gerard Valkyrie. Both of these characters are essentially immortal demigods, seemingly impossible to kill through conventional means, and serve as the ultimate final test for our heroes. It's already difficult enough as it is to decide which Sternritter is the most powerful, considering the sheer number of them and how many of them have abstract and weird powers, but at least in my mind it's these 2 titans that are vying for the utmost top spot. Sure, Gremmy can literally turn his imagination into reality, but I fail to believe he has the battle readiness to take on Yhwach's top soldiers, both hardened through years of warfare. And sure, Hashwalth's The Balance is a ridiculously broken power, but can he really outlast 2 immortal angels in battle? That one's perhaps a little trickier and a question for another day. In this video, I'm going to be comparing and contrasting Lille and Gerard in particular to try and decide which one comes out on top. And what better way to do that than to finally return to our long-dormant versus battle series. However, before we begin, first a message from today's sponsor. World of Warships is a free-to-play naval warfare-themed game available on PC that's updated every single month. So when you take to the seas in World of Warships' stunning 12v12 arenas, there's always something fresh to experience, from new ships and in-game nations to striking cosmetics, new classes, and more. Collaborations with the likes of Godzilla vs. Kong and Azure Lane ensure that there's something here for everyone. Featuring more than 40 unique maps, World of Warships boasts highly detailed weather effects and incredible new hyper-real visuals and textures. You can tackle the game's naval warfare combat either by yourself or as part of a division with your friends, each of you commanding history's most iconic battleships, destroyers, aircraft carriers, and more. With multiple ship classes available, it's up to you to decide how you conquer the seas. By the way, the game is also available on consoles if, like me, that's your preferred place to play. So if the 1000-year Blood War arc of Bleach has got you in the mood for a battle, join the World of Warships today and download the game at the link in the description. While registering, make sure to use the promo code BRAVO to receive 500 doubloons, 1.5 million credits, 7 days of premium account time, and a free ship after completing 10 battles. Thanks again to World of Warships for sponsoring today's video, and I'll see you on the seas. So, it's been a long time coming. I really enjoy making the versus battle videos, but when you have a bunch of different series on the channel like I do, it's very easy to accidentally let one slip and fall through the cracks. One day you're uploading Ulquiorra vs Asnod, the next it's somehow been 9 months since you did that. Anyway, this time we're taking a look at a potential fight between Lille and Gerard Valkyrie, 2 of the most godly characters in Bleach, and a versus battle that I'm certain won't devolve into a headache-inducing clash of unstoppable abilities. About 3 years ago or so now, one of the first big projects I uploaded to the channel was my full ranking of every single Sternritter from weakest to strongest. It was ambitious, and at the time we only had the source material to go on when it came to debating who the strongest was. Now you might be thinking, well, it's the source material, surely that's all you need. But the wealth of information that Kubo has been drip-feeding ever since the end of Bleach, plus everything that's come to light thanks to the advent of the 1000-year Blood War arc anime, and of course the light novels as well, has shown a need to consider all avenues when it comes to these characters. When it came to that original ranking, I placed Gerard Valkyrie above Lille, only by a single spot, but above nonetheless. And I've stood by that ranking pretty much ever since. To be honest, I may still stand by that ranking, it's hard to say. That's what we're here to discuss today. Like I said, both of these characters are similar in that they simply do not die. At least it seems there's nothing the power of the Shinigami could do to kill them. And so, with such a fundamental piece of the puzzle not quite slotting in, we need to take a much more holistic view to decide who comes out on top in this fight. So we'll be starting with Gerard Valkyrie first, taking a look at just about everything he had to show us throughout his time in the story, and seeing how my original frontrunner measures up these days. In my opinion, Gerard always made sense as the strongest Sternritter. He was positioned last in the narrative, being the final defender of Yhwach's new holy ground outside of Hashwolf, but then Hashwolf didn't even really get a fight. Gerard's incredible shrift granted him the ability of god size, enabling him to effortlessly take on the vast majority of the Gotei 13's forces at once. As this hulking Goliath, Gerard represented the last line of defence for Varvelt. I've discussed it before, but one of my favourite little details of the Varvelt sub-arc is how you can see the progression of the heroes, and therefore the story, in real time in relation to where they managed to get to in Yhwach's new fortress. For example, Mairi takes on Pernida right at the edge of the floating palace, fighting the gigantic hand amidst one of the former cities of the Zero Division. Lille and Askin are fought along the walkways linking to the Nexus, with Lille chasing Kyoraku back to the start, while Askin's battle takes him closer to the central citadel. And finally you have Gerard, who meets the Gotei 13 at the foot of the stairs once they reach that main building, giving off the impression that he is indeed the last obstacle, the final Schutzstaffel member, ready to give his life to defend this new sacred ground of theirs. I love the imagery as well of Gerard being not quite a truly living man, but an ancient one, resurrected as an everlasting golem designed to defend the land of his lord with everything he's got, even as he says, continuing to swing his sword for his god even in death. And honestly, I think that's where we need to start, that idea of in death, as death isn't so straightforward where Gerard is concerned. His shrift, the Miracle, is multi-layered and absurd, going so far as to defy reason itself. The simplest form of his shrift allows him to replace any part of himself that's destroyed with a version that's both bigger and stronger. As we see, Gerard's arm is sliced off by Kenpachi, but a new, larger, more powerful arm takes its place in a burst of gold light. And Kubo really does follow through with this ability right to the bitter end. After his entire body is destroyed, cut in two down the middle by Kenpachi's bankai, it is stitched back together again. You guessed it, both bigger and stronger than he was before. There can be no denying that move would have killed virtually every single character in the series. Now that we're in the 1000-year Blood War arc, Kubo is no longer so focused on censoring the goriest of scenes, so we see exactly what happens to Gerard in this moment, and he is split right down the middle, and that includes his head. In fact, it's such a fatal strike that there isn't really any room for debate, and I think that was probably the idea. Up until now, the only character to have survived a similar style attack is Aizen, of all characters, and he needed the Hogyoku in order to be able to do so. Kubo drew Gerard being killed in such an explicit, obvious fashion, so we as readers would realise that he can come back from literally anything. Oh, Gerard can't be killed by splitting him in two? Okay, how about we reduce his body to dust? And so, the captains do just that, using all of their power and teamwork to freeze Gerard before obliterating him, his colossal form crumbling to the ground. Surely now there's no way he can return, But no, the miracle truly is unending as Gerard's body rises again, only this time in a more ethereal, ghostly form. And so we can see that even if his corporeal form is decimated, a new, gargantuan Gerard erupts from the remains of his last corpse like a phoenix from the ashes, unable to die. I need to get across that it seemed like literally the only way to kill Gerard was through divine intervention, something Kubo again demonstrated when the Gotei at last got their miracle, and Gerard's flesh was stripped from his bones by the holy light of God. But that's not all Gerard's the miracle can do. His very form is built on the back of the fears of the masses manifested. In his own words, that's why he grows to a gargantuan size when injured, so as to shield them from that collective fear. His sword, Hoffnung, is the personification of the hopes of the masses brought to life. When damaged, the collective masses then feel despair, and that agony is then etched onto Gerard's enemy. Like I said earlier, it's all very weird and very conceptual, but the point is it's ridiculously strong. Another element of the miracle is to make the impossible possible. The higher the odds of Gerard's failure, the greater his success will be. For example, Gerard elects to battle the entirety of the Gotei 13's forces, not because he thinks he can win, but in fact the absolute opposite, because he knows he doesn't stand a chance against them. Because the odds are so severely stacked in their favour, Gerard amasses immense power as a result of his shrift. The same thing happens later when trying to locate the Vizards. Due to Gerard's titanic size at the time, he realises that finding these tiny people will be next to impossible, and so as a result locates them immediately. These are the kinds of abilities we are dealing with at this level of power, at this echelon of strength. And so, with that shrift, Gerard honestly looks unstoppable. But there's even more to him than that. Let's compare Gerard to a character like Gremmy, who I think acts as a decent yardstick for conversations like these. Even among powers like the Miracle, Gremmy has perhaps the single strongest shrift of the lot, apart from the Almighty. The Visionary is very simple, but in that simplicity lies its capacity for insanity. He can turn his imagination into reality. That seems like a game winner, right? Except for the fact that Kubo neuters Gremmy by making him so very lacking in many other areas. In almost every other area, in fact. Gerard, on the other hand, combines one of the mightiest shrifts in the series with a godlike strength, incredible speed, and a battle readiness honed over potentially 1,000 years worth of warfare. I mean, you can see it on the page. Gerard is capable of duking it out with Kenpachi even after the captain has removed his eye patch and activated his Shikai. In fact, Gerard is so strong that he's powerful enough to even outpace and overpower Kenpachi to the point where it looks like the captain is out of options. Conversely, Gremmy had no idea what to do in a fight. Kenpachi had to coax his power out of him, mentoring the boy as they went. By the time Gremmy looked ready to finally start using his strength properly, he accidentally killed himself in the process. Gerard, on the other hand, seems purpose-built for war, if that wasn't already obvious from his outfit of choice. Now, although we should never take a villain's own proclamations about their power too seriously, Gerard does note that he is the biggest, strongest, and fastest Quincy, even going so far as to claim he is the warrior who was bestowed everything. Presumably by Yhwach, though that's interesting in itself because Gerard's shrift doesn't come from Yhwach. Perhaps here he's referring to the Soul King if he indeed knows where his power actually comes from. Anyway, before we move over to Lille, there is one last thing to look at, and it's perhaps the most important of all. Gerard's weakness. You see, when I made that original list all those years ago, I was working under the assumption that Gerard didn't really have a weakness at all. Again, we only had the source material to use, and across his entire fight, it really looked like there was no way to actually finish this guy off whatsoever. While Lille was mostly in the same boat, at least we saw him face an actual weakness in the form of Shinken Hakyoken, as convenient as that may have been, and we'll get to that later. But the fact that something existed in the source material, something tangible that could take Lille down on the page, stood in stark difference to Gerard, who literally had to be plucked off the face of the earth by God himself. Now, I've speculated for years that the giant Quincy cross that appears when Gerard is split in half acts as some sort of core, which would fit with the idea of Gerard being a golem-like creation, and that perhaps that is some kind of weak point that could be targeted and destroyed, but considering Kubo never went any further with it and it was never seen again, even after Gerard's body was reduced to dust, I mostly let it lie. Though I brought up the theory in numerous videos over the years since. However, not that long ago, Kubo revealed over on Club Outside that yes, the Quincy cross is indeed Gerard's core, and by destroying it, one destroys Gerard for good. Though Kubo made sure to tack on that destroying the core is virtually impossible, hinting that not even Kenpachi and Bankai would have been able to achieve it. To be honest, it's always been incredibly weird that Kubo would even allude to this method of defeating Gerard and then never actually follow through on it, when the fact Gerard never stayed dead was one of the biggest criticisms of his character and that fight, even though I actually kind of liked it. So I think the anime will change how this fight works and will factor in the core to the battle itself. Even if the captains ultimately don't succeed in breaking it, it will at least be relevant to the fight. And the anime is already going some way towards highlighting it, such as when we see Senjumaru try to stab Gerard in the heart with her Shikai only to fail. The heart is seemingly indestructible. But regardless, this does change my perception of Gerard somewhat. Even if it is extremely hard to destroy, he does now have an actual weak point and something about his previously perfect form that can now be exploited. Again, maybe it is virtually impossible to do so, but still, it is there. This is the problem with characters like this. Does this now drop Gerard below Lille, or is that unreasonable? Who could actually destroy Gerard's core, and how does it even work? Let's move on to discuss Lille now before we circle back around to this point later on. In comparison to Gerard, I feel like we've talked about Lille quite a lot recently, likely due to his character analysis last month. But it is well known among the community that he is one of the strongest villains of the entire series, transforming from a fairly unassuming yet ice-cold sniper into a deranged, zealous angel. His base form isn't necessarily anything special. I mean, I say that. He would still defeat most characters in the series, but Kyoraku specifically was able to force Lille onto the back foot using just his Shikai and totally outmatched him in the end, pushing the Quincy to use his holy form. Regardless, Lille's diagram is capable of punching holes through captain level Shinigami and beyond, almost killing characters in a single shot, and he's exceptionally skilled, avoiding Kyoraku's Kageoni on the first try. Though admittedly, Lille confesses that they have information on Kyoraku's Zanpakuto, so would he have been able to leap away if he hadn't known what was coming first? Simply by watching the first round of his battle with Kyoraku, although he is eventually overwhelmed, it is clear that Lille is battle-hardened, just like Gerard. Both of them occupy the space of Yhwach's ultimate soldiers, with Lille representing modern warfare and Gerard representing medieval. They are two sides of the same coin. That being said, Gerard definitely has a lot more potential overall. It is easy to forget that Gerard is still technically in his base form when he wipes out all of the Gotei 13 thanks to his god size. He hasn't yet used his holy form, he's just become a colossus. Do I think Lille would have been able to fight the Gotei like that if they had located him? Honestly, probably not. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Lille is weaker than Gerard, it just means they have different fighting styles. As we discussed earlier, Gerard thrives when he's outmatched, that's what his ability is for. Unlike Lille, who is far more methodical, who is far more patient. Gerard is all about flinging himself into the midst of battle, getting beaten up as a result, and then powering up. So Lille is a very skilled warrior in his own right, but it's when his Schrift gets involved that things start to get crazy. The X-axis is admittedly one of my favourite Schrifts. I think it's very clever, and I like how simple it is. Anything that exists between the muzzle of Lille's gun and his designated target is completely destroyed without prejudice. He doesn't fire any bullets, instead he just obliterates everything on that axis. This is the most basic form of the X-axis, though it permeates everything Lille shows and does throughout the fight. However, once Lille has come close to death 3 times in a battle, he's finally allowed to open his tattooed eye and activate his Vollständisch, enabling him to purge all sinners. His holy form Zilliel is designed to facilitate his X-axis powers. It is a function over form transformation, removing most of the human elements from Lille's design and turning him into a pure killing machine. He goes from having 1 catalyst for the X-axis, his gun, to 24, as each hole on his many wings now acts as a sniper. Much in the same way I felt Gerard worked narratively as the strongest Sternritter, so too does Lille. His entire character is focused on the idea of purging sinners, of being an emissary of God, and in that way he feels like Yhwach's right-hand man, even more so than Hashwolf at some points. Lille even comments that he is the one closest to God, he is Yhwach's greatest masterpiece, and his terrifying angelic form only further cements this idea. With Lille, we're now far removed from the more standard Quincy found in the Sternritter below, and have quite obviously ascended to a different plane. And the further Lille is pushed, the more monstrous he becomes. Yet despite all of that, he retains his capacity to kill, even regaining his arms upon morphing into his second twisted form, adding even more weapons to his arsenal. The casual way Lille is able to devastate entire cityscapes with just a lifting of his arm speaks volumes of his power, putting him among the highest echelon of warriors in Bleach. Seeing him surrounded by flames as the city burns beneath him is quite the visual, and a testament to his strength. So, we get it. Lille is an executioner in the truest sense of the word, but what good does this do him if Gerard can flatten him in a single hit? Well, so far I've only discussed the destructive capabilities of the X-axis, but that's not even his Schrift's most incredible aspect. You see, once Lille opens his tattooed eye 3 times, he changes. In the same way his attacks go straight through his enemies, their attacks now pass right through him. Lille becomes intangible. Once he activates his holy form, he's made virtually entirely of light, and nothing can hit him anymore, whether that's a Zanpakuto or a Kido. Now, there's definitely some loopholes here, as Kyoraku was able to seriously wound and even kill Lille using his bankai, but outside of magical abilities like that where fatal outcomes are essentially a guarantee, Lille cannot be harmed by conventional methods at all. It takes the Shinken Hakyoken, the ceremonial religious blade of the Issei clan with the power to diffuse God's light, to actually injure Lille, and this is, in my humble opinion, perhaps the most contrived and convenient Deus Ex Machina in all of Bleach. The Shinken Hakyoken's mere existence is proof that Lille is completely and utterly unstoppable otherwise. Now, we don't know how his intangibility fares against his own kind, but I see no reason for it not to still work. I imagine that if Gerard were to swing Hoffnung at Lille, it would simply go straight through him, rendering Gerard virtually incapable of killing Lille. The thing is, what Lille has is more than simple intangibility. Like I said, his whole body is now made of light, so he's able to simply reform himself should he somehow be injured. Now, to be honest, unlike Gerard, where immortality is built into the miracle from day one, I'm not really sure how or why Lille is capable of surviving having his head cut off based on the X-axis itself, but regardless, he is. When his head is removed from his body, it's simply rebuilt, streams of light rising from his torso to form what looks a little bit like his original face, before he transforms even further into a draconic beast. So, while the theory perhaps isn't tested to the same degree as Gerard's, it does seem like Lille is totally unkillable as well. At least while his divine power is active. I think the weird flamingo Lille birds are perfectly capable of being killed in conventional ways, but to even reach that state, one needs the Shinken Hakyoken, so Gerard would likely never see this form of Lille. So basically, had Lille come up against anyone other than Nanao, he would never have died. Maybe Kyoraku's bankai could have killed him a second time, but even Katen doesn't believe she has the strength to take Lille down anymore. And so, for the fight itself, when it comes down to it, we are faced with the ultimate conundrum. How do you determine who is strongest between two characters that can't be killed? Who would win this fight? Initially, in my original ranking, I made the choice to put Gerard at the top because it seemed to me like he didn't have a single weakness whatsoever, while Lille did, despite it being incredibly remote. But now, things have changed. In my opinion, if we take a step back, this matter can be settled by one pertinent question. Can Lille's x-axis destroy Gerard's core? Because if it can, then Lille is the strongest of the two of them. Now, Kubo notes that Gerard's cross, his heart, is virtually impossible to break, but Kubo makes a point of taking both shrifts to their logical extremes in the source material in order to show that neither of them have any limits at all. In the same way that Gerard's miracle revives him no matter what, Lille's x-axis simply cannot be stopped no matter what. Every target that Lille successfully hits is completely destroyed, obliterated, removed from existence essentially with no exceptions. And so with that in mind, I have no reason to doubt that Lille could punch a hole through Gerard with his shrift, and as long as his aim is true, he could destroy Gerard's core in a single blast. This is all conjecture, of course, but I mean, that's the point of the video. Even if he wasn't able to one-shot Gerard's core, there's still the question of his intangibility. Gerard likely couldn't land a hit on Lille at all, unless Quincy arrows are somehow able to bypass his intangibility. And hell, if that's the case, the battle potentially shifts back onto more even ground once again. But realistically, Gerard is never getting his hands on the Shinken Hakyoken, and I don't think anything in Gerard's arsenal can hurt Lille, save for one thing. Hoffnung. Or more specifically, Hoffnung's special ability. You see, Gerard's Hoffnung works in a similar, though not identical way, to the first phase of Kyoraku's bankai, where wounds are shared between the two combatants, though in this case, the combatants in question would be Lille and Gerard's sword. If Lille fired a blast at Gerard and he tried to block it with Hoffnung, Hoffnung would be seriously damaged. I mean, the x-axis would likely just punch straight through it, but surely that injury would then be reflected upon Lille's body. It's not a conventional method of damage, it's essentially Lille hurting himself due to someone else's ability, and we've seen that work on him before. You can see then why this is a bit of a headache. So let's take a top-down look at where we currently stand with both characters and how their fight might play out. Interestingly, I think Gerard's best chance of success comes right at the start of the battle. Lille is absolutely at his most vulnerable here, and if Gerard can deal him a fatal blow before Lille gets the chance to survive a near-death encounter 3 times, then it's game over. Right now, Lille is squishy and fleshy, not yet made of light, and so if Gerard can bear down upon him with a momentous strike, he might be able to finish the fight right away. But at the same time, that's not giving Lille enough credit. Lille is also likely to try and end the fight quickly, both characters realising that the longer it drags out, the more damage they do to one another, the worse things are going to get. If we assume Lille knows about Gerard's weakness, then he might try and snipe him from afar, perhaps even hiding at the beginning of the battle to try and score the best shot. So right here we have two characters each attempting to control the early stage of the fight in different ways. Lille is trying to stay as far away from Gerard as possible while attempting to blast him with diagram, hoping to score a hit through the heart. Meanwhile, Gerard is likely to rush to try and find Lille, and the harder Lille makes it to find him, the more likely Gerard is to succeed. Perhaps then Lille's best course of action is to bait Gerard out, staying far away from him while making his presence known so that Gerard's the miracle can't kick in early. Either way, unless Lille successfully kills Gerard here, the battle is inevitably going to come to blows up close, but that doesn't immediately mean the end for Lille. As mentioned earlier, Gerard is prone to recklessly diving headfirst into battle, while Lille is a more cautious fighter, capable of even dueling the likes of Yhwach up close for a while. And so at that point, Lille simply needs to survive 3 strikes in order to access Zilliel, and by then, it might already be over. This scenario makes me question how exactly Lille's second eye actually works. Does he automatically avoid dangerous attacks, or is it something he has to consciously do? For example, in the anime's extended version of the fight between the Schutzstaffel and the Zero Division, Lille phases through Oetsu's strike, but did it happen automatically, or did he need to actually open his eye? Did he need to be aware of the fact he could have been killed? If so, what are the parameters for him opening his eye? I assume he can only do it when faced with an attack that would otherwise be fatal. He notes that he's only allowed to open his eyes briefly when he falls into crisis in battle, but to me at least, there doesn't seem to be a downside to that. It's framed as though it makes his life more difficult, but I don't really see how. If Lille faces a crisis, he can open his eye briefly and phase through that attack, and then once he's phased through 3 attacks, he can use his holy form. I mean, where's the problem with that? If that's really how it works, then Lille is far less vulnerable in these early stages than I thought. As to me at least, it seems to guarantee that he will escape death 3 times in his base form, and then immediately after that his holy form activates anyway. So, Lille succeeds in activating his Volstendish, which of course spells really bad news for Gerard. Don't forget as well that Gerard is unlikely to have become a giant against Lille. That only occurred because he was facing such insurmountable odds, and they dealt him such an enormous amount of damage. In fact, it's implied that Byakuya outright kills him during their first meeting. So, we have a normal-sized Gerard versus the now angelic Lille. And here's another question to contend with as well. How does Gerard's own Volstendish, Ashtonig, actually work? We only see him activate it in the source material when he returns from death at the hands of Kenpachi's bankai, and it seems to activate almost involuntarily to save his life. So then, does Lille need to destroy Gerard's body first before he can transform? Secondly, Gerard's body was being sliced up by Kenpachi. Against a rifle, how does that work? Gerard might get a few holes in him here and there, but how would that affect the deployment of the miracle? Would those portions of Gerard's torso that get blasted return bigger and stronger? Honestly, thinking a little deeper about this, Gerard's miracle really doesn't lend itself to fighting anything other than a sword. Anyway, let's say, to keep things interesting, that Lille misses Gerard's heart and accidentally blows his head clean off with 1 shot. That would likely cause Gerard to grow enormous, and maybe allow him to activate his holy form at the same time, bringing him to a similar place as we see him in his battle with the Gote. And so now both fighters are using their holy forms. On the one hand, you've got Gerard and his Ashtonig, who, while able to be injured via conventional methods, simply can't be killed, even if you reduce his body to rubble. Unless that core is destroyed, he will return to life, bigger and stronger than ever. On the other side, you've got Lille and his Zilliel, who seems to have many of the same advantages that Gerard does. He's unkillable, and has an ability that works without restraint. Everything Lille shoots is destroyed no matter what, and that might include Gerard's core. But while Gerard likely can't hurt Lille through standard methods, his Hoffnung seems perfect for reflecting damage back at his enemy. Both fighters are highly experienced, both are incredibly skilled, and both have additional abilities such as flight or even teleportation at their disposal. I wonder as well, if Gerard isn't able to kill Lille, if killing Lille is seen to be an impossibility, would he then be able to achieve it? After all, we discussed earlier that Gerard's the miracle plays with probability, that the less likely his chances of success, the more likely he will succeed in the end. There really are just so many avenues, as I knew there would be. Ultimately, I think Gerard has the more complex and layered shrift, providing him with more routes to victory overall. Whether that's through Hoffnung or through making the impossible possible, it does seem like his power is designed to get him out of any unfavourable situation. Although if Gerard and Lille are seen to be fairly evenly matched, perhaps he won't get a boost of any kind. Let's say as the two of them battle it out and Gerard keeps trying to swipe at Lille in vain, that Lille accidentally strikes Hoffnung's blade and blows a huge hole in it, resulting in Lille's holy form being destroyed. Lille would still likely transform again, much in the same way he did against Kyoraku, and so ultimately Gerard is still at a loss. You can replace Gerard with Kyoraku in this analogy and get essentially the same result. If Lille can destroy Gerard's core, much like he could have destroyed Kyoraku's heart, then both of these fighters, neither of whom can use the Shinken Hakkyoken on their own, are doomed. Sure, they might be able to drag the fight out and cause Lille to transform a few times, which is exactly what we see in the source material, but Lille will invariably come out on top in the end. All he has to do is score that winning shot once they've grown exhausted and bloody. Neither Gerard nor Kyoraku has anything that can stop Lille's trompette ability unless Gerard has grown so massive by this point that it simply wouldn't be enough to seriously injure him anyway. As you can see, it's a bit of a mess, but I'm here to provide you with a verdict, with a winner. And I think that while both Gerard and Lille would really push each other through each phase of the fight, the longer the battle goes on, the clearer the victor probably is. Despite Gerard bellowing that he is the Quincy who was given everything, the truth is that Lille too has been given just about everything and then some. Interestingly, it is Lille's intangibility that seals the deal for me, even more so than Gerard's immortality, because Lille has that too. And so in the end, I have to say that I think Lille Barrow Sternritter X the X-axis would be the winner, but it's really not an easy decision to come to. But Lille being the strongest makes a lot of sense to me. He was the first Quincy bestowed a shrift by Yhwach, and he leads the Schutzstaffel. Gerard will never have access to a weapon that can diffuse God's power, so Lille is safe in that regard, and Lille may be one of the few characters capable of killing Gerard for good with a well-placed shot to his heart. Gerard's Hoffnung likely can reflect damage back onto Lille, but you're asking quite a lot for the only way to injure Lille being to have him have to hit Gerard's sword, bearing in mind that unlike a warrior like Kenpachi who is all about clashing blades, that simply isn't how Lille fights. There are an insane number of variables, and the abstract nature of Gerard's power really doesn't help either. I mean, if Lille is getting the better of him, will the miracle simply kick in to reverse that fact? Or would it not really help at all in the end? As always with these versus battles, there's a lot to be said for each fighter, and I'd love to know who you think would win down in the comments below. Of course, a lot of this does come down to my own speculation, trying to balance the cold hard facts from the source material and other supplementary sources as well, with my own kind of guesswork based on what we see, there's no denying that Kubo placed both of these warriors at the absolute peak of power within the series, fitting for their holy positions beside Yhwach, beside their lord, defending their sacred ground at the very end of the war. And don't get me wrong, I don't think it would be an easy fight for either of them, particularly at the start, where I think Gerard has the best chance of overpowering Lille in straight combat. But once their halos appear and their wings blossom, once the angels rise at the end, I think Sternritter X the X-axis Lille Barrow was perhaps the most blessed of them all. But that's it for the video, guys. As always, I really hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to let me know down in the comments below, am I right on the money with the winner of this fight, or am I off base? Could Gerard kill Lille, or is the emissary of God simply too broken? Would Lille be able to put Gerard down for good by destroying his core, or is his unstoppable X-axis not up to the task? Let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments below. And I just want to say, as we close out, another thank you to World of Warships for sponsoring today's video. Make sure to use the code BRAVO when downloading the game to receive the huge starter pack featuring 500 doubloons, 1.5 million credits, 7 days of premium account time, and more. And as always, I want to end the video by saying a massive thank you to my supporters over on Patreon and giving you guys a shout out, as I really do appreciate your support so very much. It means the absolute world to me. If you like what I do here on YouTube and you want to support me over on Patreon as well, you can do just that to get your name in the credits like this and to get every video I release absolutely ad-free. Alright guys, but until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.